Next, we'll talk about the income approach to valuation. So finally, we have come to the point where we are valuing a property. So there's two general ways of the income approach. So the first one is the direct capitalization method, and the second is the discounted cash flow method. We shall look at the first direct capitalization method. It involves capitalizing the current NOI using a rate called the capitalization rate. Capitalizing just means transforming the NOI to the valuation of the property. When considering the inverse of the cap rate as a multiplier, this method is akin to an income multiplier approach. So in this case, what it's saying is that by multiplying the NOI, you'll get the property value. So the equation is the cap rate is defined as the current NOI over the property value. Or if you switch the property value to the left-hand side, you can derive the property value by dividing the NOI by the cap rate. So this is the part that we refer to capitalizing. This is what we call capitalizing the NOI. So looking at the same CapitaLand CICT REIT, so looking at the CapitaLand REITs example, we have the following retail property, and these are the valuation that is given by the appraiser. And given the NOI, which is the gross revenue minus the operating expenses, we can derive the NOI. And remember that the cap rate is defined as the NOI divided by the property value. So this divided by the valuation will give us the cap rate. Or given the cap rate, we can calculate the valuation. But in this case, this valuation is given by the appraisal, and we just generate the cap rate. The reason why we're generating the cap rate is because we want to compare the cap rate between the buildings. Remember the cap rate as the denominator of the equation. Looking at this equation, right? What does this equation remind you of? Does it not remind you of the perpetual bond equation, where the top, does it not remind you of the coupon payment, and the bottom is the discount rate? And also the same as the dividend discount model, the top is the dividend, and the below is the discount rate. So the cap rate is the same as the discount rate. Right now, you can think of them as the same. So the higher the discount rate, the riskier is the property, which result in a lower valuation for the property. So this means that the investor require a higher required rate of return before they will buy the property, which means that they only buy it if the price drops to a certain level. So the cap rate incorporate the riskiness and also the uncertainty of the future NOI. Let's look more at the cap rate. The cap rate may differ for various properties based on future income potential. So while the cap rate explicitly uses first-year income, it reflects investors' expectation of income changes and associated risk. So what this is saying is that even though we're using like a constant NOI, the cap rate can imply the uncertaintiness of the NOI. Because you're using one constant value of NOI, you can incorporate that you're uncertain of the NOI in the future by increasing the cap rate. Investor expectations about future income and risk are implicit in the cap rate, as we stated before, because the future NOI might be different. These expectations influence the cap rate that investors are willing to accept. So the cap rate represents a point in time relationship between NOI and property value. So this NOI is the current NOI. Properties with a higher growth potential have higher price to NOI ratios and thus lower cap rates, because lower cap rates result in a higher valuation. Typically, the NOI used in cap rate calculations reflects the expected income during the current or initial year of property ownership. Occasionally, the term going-in cap rate is employed to specify that it pertains to the first year of ownership when the investor entered the deal versus the terminal cap rate. This will become clearer later when we show an example of going-in cap rate. The going-in cap rate actually incorporates the terminal cap rate as well, as we will demonstrate later. The cap rate and the discount rate are closely related but distinct concepts. The discount rate represents the risk expected from an investment. So it consists of the risk-free rate plus the risk premium tailored to the investment. So this is applicable for all kinds of discounted cash flow that we have seen so far. In contrast, the cap rate, which is derived from the net operating income, is typically lower than the discount rate. Next, we move to the discounted cash flow DCF method. So remember, we said that the income approach consists of two general methods. The first is the direct capitalization method, where you calculate the cap rate and you capitalize the NOI using the cap rate. For the discounted cash flow method, we project the property income to grow at a consistent compound rate. For example, 3% annually. And the relationship between the cap rate and the discount rate can be expressed as follows. So for the DCF, we talk about discount rate on top of the cap rate. So the cap rate is equals to the discount rate minus the growth rate. And likewise, the discount rate is equals to cap rate plus the growth rate. Do you find this familiar? Discount rate minus growth rate, the R minus G. So this is the same as the denominator of a discounted growth model. The cap rate is based on the first year net operating income. The growth reflects future changes in NOI and property value. So what it means is that a growth rate, if it's a positive, means that the NOI will increase in the future. And we are assuming a constant growth in the NOI. Thus, the investor's return, which is a discount rate, is composed of the return on the first year income plus the growth in income and value over time. Intuitively, if both methods start with the same first year NOI, you'll be willing to pay more for an income stream that will grow over time. So this is saying that the reason why you do in the denominator, you do R minus G, the G is the growth rate, because you are expecting the NOI to increase. So it logically makes sense for you to pay more. So the denominator will be a smaller value and then the valuation will be higher value. So consequently, the property price is higher and the cap rate is lower. So in this case, remember the R minus G is the cap rate. So basically for a discounted cash flow, you're breaking the cap rate into a discount rate and growth rate. If the growth rate is constant, okay, this equation mirrors the dividend growth model, like I said before. When NOI doesn't grow steadily, future NOIs are projected. So this is the part that we, rather than using this equation, we will specify the NOI for a small number of uses for the terminal value. Let us look at an example. The NOI is projected to be 100,000 in the first year, with a 2% annual increase thereafter. Similarly, the property value is anticipated to rise by 2% annually. So what is this saying? So the reason for saying that the property value rises the same as the NOI is because if all else remains the same, NOI increases by 2%, the property value will also increase by 2%. So this is just indirectly saying that all other factors remain constant. Given the risk level, investors aim for a 12% internal rate of return. So this is equivalent to saying 12% discount rate. So the internal rate of return is also the same as the required rate of return. So V, the valuation of the property, is equal to NOI divided by R minus G, because now we have this growth rate of 2%. And remember that R minus G is essentially the cap rate. So we have 100,000. So this is projected to be 100,000. Remember the word projected here is important because we need to be one period ahead. And so this will result in $1 million valuation for a property. In other words, if the property is projected in the first year to pay out 100,000, with a growth rate of 2% each year and a market discount rate of 0.12, the value of the property will be worth $1 million. Another way to look into this is also the property is like an investment product that's able to generate the cash flow with the discount rate and the growth rate. When using a discounted cash flow approach to value a property, estimating the future sales price, known as the terminal value, is crucial. So in this case, we make the assumption that we are going to sell the property sometime in the known future. Just the way this is phrased is a little bit confusing. So rather than saying that we're going to hold on to the property forever, we assume that we're going to sell the property sometime in the future. And between now and the future, we are more sure of the current cash flow. So this is saying that we will use a direct capitalization method for the terminal value, and we will use the DCF for the cash flow valuation from the first year to the point where you wanted to sell the property. The cap rate used for this purpose is called the terminal or residual cap rate. So this is the one that you're going to do it, you're going to sell in the future. And it's chosen during valuation as applied to the first year NOI when the property is sold to another investor. So like the same as the dividend growth model, this is the first year after you sell the property to the investor. So this NOI it goes to the investor and not to you. Selecting the terminal cap rate is tricky because it's influenced by factors like the discount, growth rate, and market conditions. So all these we will need to make an assumption of it. If future interest rates are expected to rise, the terminal cap rate may be higher. So this makes sense because higher interest rate will cause the property to go down in value. And additionally, since the property may be older and less competitive at sale time, a slightly higher cap rate might be used. So this is just saying that we are more likely to use a terminal cap rate that is higher than the going in cap rate, which we will show later. Ultimately, the terminal cap rate may differ from the initial cap rate, depending on projected discount and growth rates. Uncertainty about future NOI could also lead to a higher terminal cap rate. Thus, it's essential to recognize the terminal cap rate may not be the same. So the initial cap rate is basically the going-in rate, which we'll show later. Assume that the future NOI is going to be uncertain, it will result in a higher terminal cap rate. The NOI is projected to remain steady at 100,000 annually for the next 5 years due to existing leases. Okay, so this is because of the existing lease, we can be fairly sure that the NOI is 100,000. The reason why I say is you're fairly sure because NOI is calculated after deducting the operating expenses, which we cannot know for sure. From year 6 onwards, it's anticipated to rise to 120,000 due to a lease rollovers, and you're anticipating quite a significant rise in the NOI, right? 100,000 to 120,000. And you're also assuming that you have a subsequent 2% yearly increase. Similarly, the property value is expected to increase by 2% annually after 5th year. So this is the part that is ties to the 2% increase in the future NOI. Investors seek a 12% return and plan to hold the property for 5 years. What is the current value of the property? To compute the terminal cap rate, so remember the discount rate is 12%. That's the required rate of return. And the assumed growth rate is 2%. So this results in a 10% terminal cap rate. And the resale price, by using the cap rate, the resale price at the 5th year is calculated by capitalizing 120,000 expected future NOI by 0.1, result in a 1.2 million resale price. But because this resale price is calculated 5 years in the future, we've got to discount it back also by the current NOI for the subsequent 5 years. This comes back to the PV of about $1.041 million. And by using this PV, this valuation that we computed, by assuming the terminal value and the consistent current NOI, This results in a cap rate of 9.6%, which we call the going-in cap rate or the initial cap rate. Note that the initial cap rate is lower than the terminal cap rate due to the reason we stated earlier. But an intuitive way of seeing why this is the case is because we actually assume a very high future NOI. And also because the fact that the 5 years of NOI is all constant at 100,000, which is with no uncertainty. Initial cap rate tends to be lower than the terminal cap rate. We have said repeatedly. Investors are willing to pay a higher price upfront because they are anticipating an increased NOI upon lease renewal at market rates in the future. This is the part that we have said about a huge jump in the future NOI. So this expectation influences the cap rate by lowering the cap rate. Typically, the terminal cap rate is higher due to the uncertainty of future income. So this is the income that we are uncertain about, 120,000. And the uncertainty also includes the property's aging, so implying less growth potential. However, there are exceptions. There are times where the terminal cap rate might in fact be lower. For instance, future rates are expected to decrease or market conditions are forecasted to improve significantly, resulting in higher rental growth. So in that case, for the terminal cap rate, we would just choose a value that is smaller.